If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am very excited to be joined by a critically acclaimed writer of adult and children's fiction who's been publishing novels for over 3 decades, as well as spending some time managing a publishing house. It's Simon Mason. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks so much for coming on. Let's jump right in. So much to talk about, but first things first, we always like to start these episodes by talking about the latest and upcoming publications. You are a busy man when it comes to writing. You've already had one novel out this year in January, and that was the 4th D.I. Ryan Wilkins book. Before we talk about the upcoming novel, tell us a little bit about Ryan Wilkins and that series and those books.
Okay, so I call these the Ryans, but there are 2 main characters, both called Wilkins rather confusingly. Ryan Wilkins and Ray Wilkins. Ryan, if you saw Ryan in the street wearing baggy tracky bottoms and a loop jacket and baseball cap and a bit of bling and a can of energy drink, you would start to make assumptions. You would think he's probably got a big dog on a chain back in his caravan, and he's probably been in and out of jail a bit, never done a day's work in his life, and has 3 or 4 different kids with different mothers he never sees. He's probably a member of the criminal classes. But you would be wrong, because although he grew up in a trailer park, his father's a violent alcoholic, he has become a detective inspector at Thames Valley Police. He has a partner called Ray Wilkins, and he is exactly the opposite. So for a start, he's black. He's London Nigerian heritage. He is privately educated, went to Oxford, double first PPE, Balliol College, debating trophy, boxing blue, very handsome, very articulate, very smooth and suave, and very well dressed. And their partners, and you wouldn't think they would get on, and they don't. And that's basically the concept behind all these books. They find themselves working together, the chav and the posh boy, and it's a situation I thought it had dramatic possibilities.
Yes, absolutely. It's the forced proximity of 2 people who would probably, in no other circumstance, spend time with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very traditional concept, this sort of mismatch pairing, not just in crime, but whether it's Don Quixote and Sancho Panza or Jeeves and Wooster or whatever, the literature is full of these sorts of mismatches.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in crime, it's the buddy cop thing, right?
Yes. And so I'm riffing on that. I'm riffing slightly blind because I don't read a lot of crime fiction, but I'm sort of vaguely aware of it.
Okay. And that's already out. The 4th book in that series came out in January. Upcoming this year on June 5th, I think it is, The Woman Who Laughed is coming out, and that's part 3 in your Finder series. Tell us a little bit about that series and where that novel sits within it.
Yes. So I'd written the first of the Ryans. No, the first of the Ryans had been published, and I'd just finished the second of the Ryans. Mm-hmm. And I really like doing both of them. They're sort of quite chunky, for me anyway, 80, 90,000 words long. They're sort of action-driven. They're third person telling. They're all set in Oxford. And I suddenly had the urge to write something completely different. So the Finder books come out of this need for variety as a writer. So they're the opposite of the Ryans. They're first-person narration. They're told by the main character. Each is set in a different city, not in the same city. They're very short, 40,000 words, not 80,000 words. And they're less action-driven. They're more character-driven. And instead of being crime, they are missing persons novels. And so the conceit here is that someone has gone missing in the past. The police have investigated. They've concluded that they can't find the person and that the person is really likely no longer to be alive, and they've closed the case. And then several years later, a new piece of evidence emerges, and the police need to reactivate the case because it now looks like that person might not be dead but might still be alive somewhere. And so they call in a freelance person to help them find the missing person. And so I have a character who tells the story. I call him Finder, and his police colleagues call him Finder, but he's a freelance specialist in finding people. And he is brought in by any police force that has a case that they need solving, but their budgets are too tight to take it on in-house. And he comes in, and the story then is told by him, and it's the investigation into the missing person. And he's a character who is very empathetic. He's a listener. And he has an idea that the best place to look for a missing person is in the memories and imaginations of the people who knew that missing person best. And so he spends a lot of time talking to people and listening to their stories involving the missing person to try and work out what sort of person they were and what decisions they might have made to lead him to try and find them.
Okay, that's interesting. So both the series are within a sort of similar sphere. They are sort of mystery, police orientated things, but from a very different direction and from very different characters.
Yes, exactly. So when I thought to myself, I need to write something very different, I did not want to write, say, a straightforward literary novel, which I've done in the past, actually. That's how I began, by writing literary novels. I wanted to write something that might not be crime, but which had what you might call a narrative engine. And, you've identified it. It's a mystery. Mm-hmm. The reader is on a journey with the characters in the book to discover something that's gone wrong, something that's hidden, something that needs to be uncovered. I ought to say that I wrote the first Finder really for my own refreshment. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. And then I sent it to my agent, and he rang me up and he said, "What's this? Are you having a laugh? Is this some sort of joke? Simon, I'm just about to negotiate a new contract for some police procedurals, and now you've thrown this spanner into the works with something completely different." And I said, "I'm really sorry." And he said, "Well, for God's sake, don't send it to the editor." And I had to say, "I'm really sorry. I've already sent it." So he not everyone was pleased with this development in my writing, I've got to say. Anyway, I was very fortunate. My editor liked the Finders as well as the Ryans.
Oh, okay. That's a funny story. But in terms of these series, are they written so that you need to have read them in order, or are they written so that you could sort of jump in at any of them and you would be able to catch up quickly with what's going on?
I think the idea is, and always has to be really in a series, that you can pick up any book in the series and read it on its own terms as a self-contained narrative. So I would hope that's true of all the books in both series. Having said that, any writer of series is also faced with the issue of how to proceed in terms of chronology. So you've basically, as I see it, got two choices. One is every book is completely separate, Lee Child does that, I think, pretty much with Jack Reacher.
Yeah.
Or you have the books arranged in chronological order so that although each title is a self-contained narrative, nevertheless it takes place sequentially in time. And I chose to do that with the Ryans. So, in other words, the second book, The Broken Afternoon, takes place in the months immediately after the events of the first book, A Killing in November. And the reason I did that was, in some ways, it poses more problems for a writer, but it gives you the opportunity of exploring a developing relationship between your ongoing characters. And I was really keen to do that. One of the things about both Ryan and Ray is that they're parents. Ryan has a little boy, also called Ryan, little Ryan, and Ray has twins, and they're growing up. So I wanted to make their growing up and the changing relationships they have with their fathers part of the ongoing story.
Oh, okay. So you could read these in any order, but there is sort of something kind of ticking along if you do read them in the chronological order.
Yeah. So I don't want to say, oh, look, you've got to begin at the beginning, because that's not true. You could read any book, but if you begin at the beginning and then proceed to read the second one and third one, then you will get the full force of this overarching ongoing narrative.
Yes. Oh, okay. That's really interesting. And I wanted to touch on, you've mentioned that the reason you started the Finder series is because you wanted to mix things up. You wanted just a bit of variety. But I know that prior to this, and you mentioned you'd written literary fiction, you've also written children's novels, you've written across multiple different styles. But I'd love to focus on the children's novels parts of it. What made you want to, because you started in adult and you're currently writing adult, what made you want to write for younger audiences?
Yeah, we had children. That's what happened. My wife and I had children, and suddenly our world was children-oriented. The house was full of children. I mean, dozens and dozens. It turns out there are only two.
Yeah.
But at the time, it did seem like an absolute household. And I think I must be the sort of writer who likes to write what's around him. I don't fly off and set my books in strange places, and I don't set them in the past, for instance. Maybe I hate research. Maybe that's it. It's an aspect of laziness. I write about what I can see from the room in which I write, and what I could see was children. And so I was interested in what they were doing. And I was also, of course, like any parent, reading children's stories to my children as they grew up. And again, I'm quite imitative. So I was reading these children's books and thinking, these are fantastic. These authors are just wonderful. They can do stuff with a limited vocabulary. And the literary effects that they can create are just marvelous. I wonder if I could do something similar. And so I started writing, first of all, for very young readers, the readers who are just beginning to read on their own or just still sharing stories with parents, 7 to 9-year-olds. So I wrote 4 books about a family called The Quigleys, which, to be honest, they were just really autobiographical stories, which was slightly awkward because I remember the first reviews coming out saying, oh, very nice comic stories about totally hapless parenting. And my wife and I were a bit pissed off with that. But nevertheless, it was true that they were autobiographical. Then I wrote a middle grade novel, what the Americans call middle grade, 8 to 12-year-old. And then I wrote YA books, young adult. I've never met anyone who calls themselves a young adult, to be honest. But it's a publishing and, I don't know, critical term. Mm-hmm. And my books, in other words, grew up at the same rate my own children were growing up, just lagging a few years behind. And so again, I think it's an aspect of me writing about what's around me.
Okay.
I was interested in my children at each stage, but I've got to say, I mean, there'll be people maybe listening to this who are also members of the teenager survivors.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Club. But the teenage years were just extraordinary. And if I think of the most bizarre and wonderful things in the world, I don't know what, quantum mechanics or the Chrysler Building or Trump, I think teenagers just top the lot. They're just like these extraordinary exploding devices out in the world, discovering themselves and the world around them. And I remember just being completely engaged with those books because I felt I was dealing with totally flammable material.
Okay, sort of burn after reading material.
Yeah, God.
Did you ever, did your children read the novels as they were coming out? Because it sounds like you were writing kind of for their age.
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember when I first read them, the first Quigley's stories, and they said, children are wonderful readers. They're so direct and honest. If you're reading something to them and it's a bit boring, they'll shout out, "You're boring, more jokes, get on with it." Anyway, they shouted out, "Hang on, stop. This is us, isn't it? This is our stories." And my son, who was then only about 6, said, "There must be copyright issues involved here. Do we not have some sort of image rights or something?" I can't remember the vocabulary he was using. But anyway, he was quite concerned that I was stealing. Whether they read them then, yeah, I think they did read them, and I think they certainly read one of the YA books. I don't think they were desperate to read them, to be honest. They sort of, did they even like the idea of them? I don't know. I should ask them, shouldn't I? I mean, now they're enormous and somehow older than I am. I don't understand how that happened, but they know more about the world than I ever did anyway.
Okay.
And I don't think they're unhappy to be in the books.
Okay, right. Was it just the middle grade ones that was sort of more autobiographical? With the YA ones was a bit more fiction leaning?
Yes. I mean, yes, the very early ones were really autobiographical. The middle grade, which was about an 11-year-old girl looking after her alcoholic father, I like to think that's not at all autobiographical. And then the YA books, the stories were not autobiographical at all. In fact, they were crime stories. So that's when I first started writing crime for a YA audience. Although the main character is based very closely on a friend of my son's. He's basically a slacker genius called Garvey Smith. 16-year-old boy, bright as anything, highest IQ ever recorded in his school, worst grades ever, just totally lazy, which is a type of boy really well represented in life. But I felt less well represented in literature. When I used to go into schools and stuff, I talk to teachers and they say, "We got dozens of these kids."
Yeah.
Yeah, these boys, you can't get them to do anything, but they're bright as anything.
Yeah. There was a guy I was at school with who, and he still talks about it to this day. I remember one time we all got our grades back, and at my school they did, the letter was your like how accurate you were, and the number was your effort that you put in. And he once got an A5. And he still talks about it to this day.
Yeah, there you go. You see, they're thick on the ground in real life, but you don't read about them too much.
No, because I guess it's not. Well, obviously you've made it work into a story, and you could make an interesting character out of it. But it's not that interesting to watch someone. It's a Mary Sue, basically, right? They're succeeding at everything with no effort.
Yes. So I must be careful now to say something so that your listeners don't get the impression that the books are really dull. So the books are crime, and the conceit here is Garvey Smith, brightest but laziest boy you've ever met, disenchanted, disaffected with everything. Why should he bother doing anything? Because the world's a piece of cheap carpet fluff. He's got no faith in anything. What would get him out of bed? A murder. When the body of his ex-girlfriend is pulled out of Pike Pond dressed in her running kit, he gets interested in that because he's got the sort of brain that can look at the detail and spot things, and so while everyone else is going, oh my God, this is terrible, she was out running and someone's attacked her and assaulted her and killed her, he's thinking to himself, I don't think they're her shoes, because the colour scheme doesn't fit, and she was always very colour coordinated. And so he gets involved in working it out as a puzzle. He's a mathematics person. He's got that sort of analytical brain. So anyway, hopefully it's not quite as dull as it might otherwise be.
Well, that makes it sound more like, in my head, to compare it to something that I'm familiar with, that everyone's familiar with, is that's a lot of the iterations of Sherlock Holmes are much more like that, where he's essentially disinterested and lazy. But then when he becomes interested, he becomes motivated to actually investigate things.
Exactly that. And like Sherlock as well, he doesn't reveal what he's working out necessarily. So there is always the mystery of, he can't really be asked to do that. He doesn't bother with explanations. He just comes up with startling statements at the end of the process of him analysing a situation. And so, yes, and he's anarchic, so he smokes a bit of puff and all sorts of stuff. And the investigating officer on these cases, because there's more than one in the end, is a Sikh detective who is a stickler for the rules. And so, you've got a mismatched couple, actually thinking about it, between the anarchic rule-breaking Garvey Smith and Raminder Singh, who is the very upright and uptight Sikh policeman. Yes,
because I think, as all writers know, you get the most fun conflict when you have two people that are inherently at odds with each other.
Yeah, so I'm thinking again, and I think probably always I'm thinking of dramatic possibility first and foremost. Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to approach it, and I think a very well-trodden path to approaching how to design characters and put them together and stuff. We are at the point in the episode where I take all of your things and push you out into the sea and ask you, Simon, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be? Very good question. I've got to cope with my panic at the thought of being alone on a desert island to begin with, because would I read anything, or would I just break down and spend all day weeping? If I had a book, though, it would be Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray.
Okay.
And I choose that because, well, for a number of reasons, but one is I would be pretty sad, I think. So I'd want to be entertained. I'd want something to cheer me up. I'd want something that made me laugh and just grin with pleasure. So, there are other books that you would argue perhaps are greater. But if I took Proust, it would be such an effort to get through it, to be honest. So I'd be frightened of doing that. Vanity Fair would just give me that bit of uplift every time I read it. And it would give me uplift, I think, because it's got everything. It's a bit like life. It's got a capaciousness that most novels lack. In terms of the characters, it's got a vast array of different characters, all of them sort of fantastically interesting, the major ones, the minor ones. At its heart, of course, Becky Sharp, the original artful little minx. I would basically be interested in anything that she does, and she's a fabulous, absorbing character. It tells you an awful lot about the society in which it's set. Its literary technique is fantastic, this idea of the narrator as a sort of historical tour operator. The tone is wonderful. It gets me grinning when I go back to it. And I think that's really what I would need on my desert island.
Yeah, that's great. I think a first as well. I don't think anyone else has chosen Vanity Fair.
I'm surprised. What do they usually choose?
To be honest, it's a pretty good spread. I would say the most popular author is Jane Austen.
Right. Yeah.
She gets a lot of representation on the island.
Yeah.
Dickens.
She's a good one. Yeah, the trouble with Austen, maybe I thought about Austen because I love her novels, but they are quite short.
That's
and if you're on a desert island, then you read it in a day, and then you go back and read it again, and you can do that for a limited number of days. But Vanity Fair is big compared to that.
Yeah. And a great choice as well is you said that you'd be worried about the fact that you were alone. Like you said, Vanity Fair has such a wide array of characters. There's such a huge cast. Like there's so many people there to keep you company, to kind of put you back in the middle of being surrounded by people and the hustle bustle.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I hadn't consciously thought of that, but that must be a reason why I've chosen it as well. Yes, a bustle of people around me on my desert island.
Yes, it's not a lonely book.
No.
Amazing. Well, a great choice. Like I said, a first for the podcast.
What's your choice?
People do sometimes throw this back at me. My usual go-tos are, because I grew up on Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, and they are my kind of my home and my hearth in some ways when it comes to writing and stuff. So it would probably either be The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or one of Terry Pratchett's, probably Small Gods, is the one that really resonates with me.
Right.
So very whimsical, very sort of lighthearted, but with just like very heartfelt, I think. Especially Terry Pratchett's so heartfelt. Douglas Adams is incredibly smart beneath all the whimsy. So those are two novels that I just absolutely adore.
And both, I can't say anything really because I haven't read either. But they're known, right, for their humour? Yes,
they are very silly and very whimsical, but also very, I would say, very British humour as well.
Ah, right.
I would absolutely recommend trying out The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's excellent. I adore that novel.
So when you say that, sorry to badger you now, are you talking about one book, or are you talking about a trilogy of books? Or a tetralogy?
The Hitchhiker's Guide is a trilogy of 5, which kind of tells you vaguely what the humor of the book is like. Yeah. The first one for me is absolutely the best one, outstanding, and you can read the first one very much as a standalone. The sequels are also good, but the first one for me is like the really special one.
And that's the one you're taking to a desert island, or are you allowing yourself all 5?
Well, I guess I could cheat and I could just take them all. But I would take the first one is the priority. It's the most important one. Okay. I think most people I've spoken to have said the same thing, where they're like, the first one is the kind of pride and joy of the whole thing. And you don't necessarily need to read the other ones. They are fun. They are good. But the first one is the best.
Okay. Very good recommendation. Thank you.
It's very short. Is the only holdback about taking it to the desert island is that it is very short, but I absolutely adore it. So I think it probably has to be there. So next up in the episode, I've got some questions about more publishing industry stuff, how Simon first broke in as a writer and how things have changed over the years. That's going to be in the extended episode available at patreon.com/rightandwrong. So...
And it's just much more interesting, there's more to think about, you've got a handle on a much bigger variety of stuff going on, and that's always exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Simon, for coming on the podcast and telling me all about everything you've been up to and your kind of like incredible experience with writing and publishing over the years. It's been really, 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 really interesting chatting with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And for anyone listening, all 4 of the D.I. Ryan Wilkins books are out right now. You can go get those in all the usual places. And The Woman Who Laughed, the 3rd installment of the Finder series, is out on June 5th. To support this podcast, like, follow, subscribe, join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes, and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Simon. Thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.